Welcome to another episode of the WAN Manager podcast. I'm your host, Bryan, and this is the show where we talk to networking experts about the data services that make business possible. Over the past couple of years in the networking space, the hype cycle has kind of moved on a little bit from SD-WAN and towards SD-WAN plus SASE and now SSE, or however folks are saying that particular one, to help us navigate through all those changes and specifically how they're impacting the infrastructure team with respect to SD-WAN. I'm very happy to welcome to the show today Nav Chander, who is the head of SD-WAN SASE Product Marketing for Service Providers at Aruba HPE. Welcome to the show, Nav. Thanks for joining us.
Greg, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's been a really interesting journey. A few years ago, I was sitting on your side of the table in your shoes.
I know that when we first met, you were an analyst, right?
That's right. I was an analyst, in fact, focusing on a lot of the emerging technologies. In fact, myself and another colleague, a former colleague at IDC, did the first SD-WAN forecast way back in 2015 when nobody knew what SD-WAN was.
It was hardly a thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But my background is, I joined Silver Peak after being at IDC for 6 years, but I've been in telecom and networking for 25 plus years. Silver Peak, I helped the company focus on the service provider and system integrator market specifically. Those were new channels, and Silver Peak, as you probably know from your background, predominantly an enterprise-focused company, very successful in the WAN optimization space for many, many years, and helped the company on the journey, pivoting it from WAN op to SD-WAN. And I could say that we were successful in doing that. Obviously, market, I can say that, but the market speaks stronger words than me in terms of the analysts, but also revenue-wise, the company was successful and went through the acquisition in 2020 by HP Aruba, and I'm still here, and I'm expanding my focus into the security space. But as a company, we're Aruba's in many markets, and we're doing a lot with service provider partners in SD-WAN and SASE.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a few years ago, of course, a lot of the talk around SD-WAN was in that there's going to be a lot of acquisitions, and if somebody had asked me then, we would have said a lot of these big startups are going to be subsumed into larger vendors or MSPs or whatever the case may be. And it's good to have been vindicated. There's really only like one kind of pure play SD-WAN startup, big one left out there, right? So it's and I think there's some really obvious reasons for that to have happened. So it's always nice when, as an analyst, your forward-looking statements end up being more or less true, right?
Right. I know. I completely agree. And I'm fortunate, like I said, we with Silver Peak, it's been, and now Aruba, it's been a lot of fun being part of that growth wave. And just like you, and when I was in my analyst shoes, I made that prediction as well too. There'd be a lot of that, but it's actually been a lot more companies in this space than anyone would have thought 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And likewise, as we're going to get to in the SASE space and ZTNA as well. So yeah. So Nav, you have an ebook out on this topic from I guess kind of mid last year maybe, and in that ebook, which I recommend everyone go find and read. It definitely I found it very useful. You start out with a review of kind of the need for a SASE framework or posture in the current WAN environment. And I thought that would be a good way for us to start today, if you could kind of lay that out and set the stage for why we need to think about a SASE framework.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. I mean, even since I appreciate your comments on the ebook, even since the ebook is available, it's everything is changing so fast, right? Because
that's what keeps it fun, right?
Yeah, that's what keeps it fun. In fact, I was being asked maybe I need to update the ebook again. But the point here is that the SASE framework that Gartner came in, they were lucky. I mean, it was a little bit of luck because it was at the end of 2019 when SASE came to be from Gartner,
right before remote work,
before the pandemic and remote work hit us like a tidal wave. And so I think it's really useful because it created a framework, and I'll use that term a lot, and because it's not a market segment, as you know, you as an
Right.
analyst would know, it's really a framework that Gartner put together to kind of deal with the confluence of many different trends. You got enterprises trying to figure out what are they going to do as the migration to cloud, the use of more and more cloud apps. How do I
Hmm.
secure those cloud apps? And at the same time, the data center starts to diminish in its role as being the gatekeeper or the castle where all the apps are now housed, and
Hmm.
therefore
Hmm.
security became a bigger challenge because all of a sudden you've got apps being accessed from various cloud providers, SaaS providers, and you have shadow IT. And Greg,
Right.
you can never overestimate the fact that if we talk to some of the security companies that track this, like Zscalers and Netscope, there's tons of shadow IT still happening
Yeah.
even today, and it's not gonna go
It's
away.
really easy to sign up for a SaaS service without consulting
Exactly.
your network department, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's kind of a lot. I think where SASE has really given the IT folks a framework to kind of deal with networking and security. I think what happened was, there's a lot of elements of SASE. So SASE is not revolutionary; it's evolutionary.
Hmm.
It's really
Hmm. Hmm.
taking a lot of the security building blocks like zero trust. We're going to talk about ZTNA or zero trust network access, CASB, uh, secure web gateway, firewall as a service, and of course SD-WAN and all the different WAN edge components like
Hmm.
WAN optimization, routing, and other analytics and things. So it was kind of taking all of that, and Gartner decided this is, I mean, it looked like, and they were right in that enterprises had to figure out how they're going to manage all of this over all of these different branch, and they didn't predict they'd have to start doing it over remote sites or
Right.
the branch of one, as we sometimes call it, meaning our
Hmm.
homes, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the new paradigm that I think that's how it started. And the fact is the WAN has been, as Greg, better than I do, having tracking MPLS and carrier Ethernet, has been fairly static for the past 15 or
Hmm.
years. Before
Hmm. Yeah.
SD-WAN came, that was the first wave, right? So SD-WAN kind
Right.
of paved the way for SASE in many ways on the networking side,
Hmm.
and I think the use of cloud apps just exacerbated the need for better security, but not just security, it's security, and we'll talk about that security by role, by identity, and by application. There's many
Right.
aspects of security that have evolved now, and not to mention Internet of Things or operational technology. We always say IoT, but there's also OT, the old stuff,
Hmm.
valves
Hmm.
and systems that are in place for years and years, or underground, or in all kinds of
Right.
locations that don't have connectivity uh, from the in on to the internet. So that's
Hmm.
created a real need, I think, and I think that's why there's so much hype around SASE for the past 3 years now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're in the phase of that hype cycle where first kind of to that point of the need for it, that some of these elements of SASE were already in place. Of course, they're as you said, evolutionary, not revolutionary, but it's putting them all together in a way to work with this modern shape of the network, the modern topology of the network. I think that seems to be the core of what it is that we're getting at with SASE. But I wonder, even though obviously everybody listening to this show has been hearing about this for the past couple years at least, and it comes up, fairly often in general WAN conversations now. But I still think from where we sit right now, it's useful to get different perspectives on even exactly what do we mean when we talk about SASE. So I wonder if you could kind of hit what you think the key sine
Hmm.
qua non elements of SASE
Yeah,
are.
yeah, no, sure, Greg. We're happy to do that. So, I think when SASE came out, there was so much hype, and all vendors, all the vendors, and I'm not going to say Aruba was any different than that, all of us wanted to say, yes, we're supporting SASE, but what is SASE?
Right.
And
Sassy washing, right?
SASE washing. And as I say to
Yeah.
some people, if you are not in our networking or security business, it's like going to Baskin Robbins and saying, what flavor of ice cream would you like? And you say, I want all of them. So,
Right. Exactly.
there was no,
That's a big stack, right?
that's a big stack.
That's a big service stack.
So I think it was a little bit like SD-WAN. It's a little deja vu. Even with
Mhm.
SD-WAN, I think over time you could see some consensus on a definition. I think with SASE, Gartner did a good job of defining it, as I mentioned earlier, as five major technologies. Cloud access security broker, or
Mhm.
CASB, secure web gateway, which is abbreviated SWG, zero
Mhm.
trust network access, or ZTNA, WAN edge, which in Gartner's terms primarily means SD-WAN. And by the way,
Mhm.
the WAN edge magic quadrant is going to evolve into the SD-WAN magic quadrant. So for the
Right.
listeners, that's very interesting to see that development. And then finally, firewall as a service. And I think what's made SASE definition more relevant is about a month ago, Gartner came up with another category under the
Mhm.
SASE umbrella. So you have SASE here at the top. You've got WAN Edge, which will become SD-WAN, and you've got SSE, Security Service Edge. So that's
Mhm.
another grouping. It's a subgrouping. It's really the CASB, Secure Web Gateway, and Zero Trust. And that's a category of that Gartner is suggesting. Obviously, it's security focused. So that
Mhm.
becomes your security pillar, if you want to call it, from a SASE perspective, and SD-WAN becomes the networking pillar. And those are
The
the
access
two,
part of it,
the access
basically. Yeah.
part. And those are the really two
Mhm.
cornerstones of what a SASE framework should consist of. And,
Mhm.
I think uh, there's really so many ways that enterprises can treat that. And enterprises traditionally have their security teams and their networking teams. And
Exactly.
it's not clear, but it's clearly certainly obvious that both teams need to be involved in the discussion when it comes to building a SASE framework.
Yeah. Yeah.
And initially, I think a lot of the marketing around SASE was from the security side of a lot of the vendors. Everyone wanted to
Mhm.
be on, including a number of SD-WAN vendors. Everyone wanted to be on the SASE bandwagon. But when you really peel back what SASE is, as I was explaining, you've got to look at what do you need in that portfolio, and should you be
Mhm.
looking at a best in class for each of the networking and security pillars. And
Right.
that's something that each enterprise is going to have to make that evaluation as they go through you know, the SASE um, evaluation with where they are, what they have in their
Mhm.
infrastructure.
Yeah, because
Uh,
you already have a lot of both transport and security vendors set up. If you're looking for a broad framework with maybe a small number of providers for that stack, then do you have to switch out a bunch of different vendors and all those kinds of questions to get to a
yeah,
sort of like complete SASE framework? That I think that seems like it's going to be a really big challenge for a lot of
yeah.
organizations.
And in fact, the one of the analysts from Gartner just a few weeks ago again said, today's world. So obviously, SASE came out in 2019. He says, the security focused vendors offer SSE part of SASE, and they're going to be the ones
Hmm.
influencing the purchase and buying. At the same time, and this is directly from the analysts, vendors in the WAN edge infrastructure market cover the networking portion, and those should be considered by the networking buyers. So I think, you know,
Hmm.
some of the haze around, is SASE only security, and do you need
Right.
SASE and you don't need SD-WAN? The answer
Hmm.
is simple equation, Greg. Simply put, SASE equals SD-WAN plus SSE. So,
There you go. Yeah.
so I think because there's a lot of confusion. Oh, you don't need, if you have SASE and everyone's working remote and you have security solutions, you don't need SD-WAN. Well, that may not be true, because as many of us
Hmm.
know, if we're part of companies where we'll be going to the office, you will want to have those branch office or corporate headquarter policies be enforced when you're
Right.
working in those offices. And then when you work at home, you may be using another set of SD-WAN slash SASE technologies that are
Hmm.
compatible with that. So it's a
Hmm.
hybrid world that you need security, you need networking, and therefore SASE makes more sense even now than it did in 2019.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point about sort of the different teams on the enterprise side, I mean, we've definitely seen a big increase, just kind of from an org chart perspective of there being security experts on the networking team, the infrastructure
Mhm.
team, or improving their liaisons between those teams, or even sometimes moving security out of where it traditionally was. We've talked about this on the show before, but just it bears repeating that there's some organizations where IT security ultimately answers to a CISO who's the same person that the people swiping badges
Mhm.
answer to, right?
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? So that
yeah.
that all of security from both an IT and non-IT perspective were under one silo, and to really move some of that's appropriate for the IT group under IT at least, let alone under the infrastructure or WAN team. So there's some just kind of like HR work to be done yet, let alone the sort of technical
And you
aspects.
have the same. You're absolutely right. And you have the same issue with the service providers or the telecom service, the
Hmm.
managed service
Yeah.
providers. They're no different. They have their silos today in that then they offer the managed WAN services or the managed security services. They're completely different teams and organizations.
Hmm.
And they have the same challenge as well when they're trying to figure out, well, am I going to offer a managed SASE service? What is that going to
Right.
be, and how am
Right.
I? Who's going to be operationalizing that? My security teams or my
Right.
networking?
Right, and in a certain sense, even who sells it, right? So
Yeah.
when someone approaches us with an RFI, we need to respond to that RFI with a plan in place for that whole entire suite of services, rather than just here's your DIA and your MPLS
Hmm.
connections or whatever. So it becomes much more complicated in that sense too. One thing that you mentioned, Nav, that I wanted to follow up a little bit on is you mentioned sort of the ZTNA as one specific element of SASE. And what I find interesting about sort of framing it that way is that then there's like sub elements of ZTNA that are worth highlighting as well, right? So if if ZTNA is sort of one of your pillars of SASE in that sense, then you also have to work out, well, what does ZTNA look like from the enterprise perspective? I wonder if you could maybe go through some of the specific elements that might make up a zero trust posture as well.
Yeah, so that I think it's a good question. I mean, ZTNA is really is a set of technologies that operates on zero trust, and zero trust framework is kind of the don't trust anything, don't trust any
Mhm.
application, don't trust any user. Start on that premise, and it's really again a
Never
framework.
trust, always verify, right? So
Always, yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And so,
yeah.
although its application level controls have been the focus within Zero Trust for many years, and it's still evolving. By the way, a lot of enterprises, as
Hmm.
you probably know, have not yet implemented Zero Trust. They're trying to, they're also
Absolutely.
trying to do that. They're also trying to deal with SD-WAN and SASE. So all of these different solutions have, you have to spend time and really understand it. So unpacking it a little more, for zero trust, you need a complete strategy that encompasses network security and the number of growing connected devices. So whether there
Hmm.
be BY,
Hmm.
bring your own device, which, as we know, working remotely now or in this new world is going to be more and more the case, but it also has to include Internet of Things and devices
Hmm.
that are industrial, security cameras, the traditional video cameras, and all of the other types of sensors and devices that are out there. We have in specifically in Aruba built a number of solutions and have been
Hmm.
building that. One of them is called ClearPass Device Insight. So it really uses active and passive discovery and allows you to look at the profiles of all the different types of devices that are connected, whether it be laptops, tablets, smartphones, and other, printers, you name it, anything. And this allows you to look at all the IoT devices as well. And at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, so that's looking at a device. You also need, when comes back to the where SD-WAN and SASE play, but with zero trust, you also need a policy management platform, right? So we have something called
Right.
ClearPass, which Aruba's had for many years for wired and wireless LAN solutions. So Aruba has a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those, thousands and thousands of customers deploying those solutions. And those are role-based access policies that IT and security teams can develop and do by roles. So for example, if I'm an HR specialist, I only have access to HR apps. I may be working in a
Right.
remote location. If I'm a security person, I only, security in the traditional sense, physical security. I may have access
Right.
to that security camera on that location, but I may not want to give that individual, unless they're the manager, access to all
Mm-hmm.
the other security cameras in other locations. So that kind of
Right.
role based and where you are also can move. The role can also move. If you physically move, it doesn't mean you can't access those if you have the right privileges. So that
Right. You
kind
have
of,
user credentials or device, awareness, so that you have that privileged access management, no
absolutely, yeah.
matter where you are. Right. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, so that access control, that kind of technology has become very important. And then what we are doing, taking that kind of zero trust model across the LAN and the wireless infrastructures, we're now taking that same kind of segmentation and role-based policy into SD-WAN. So we're
Mm-hmm.
integrating Aruba, which, it was a Silver Peak platform, Edge Connect, and that will be also managed by ClearPass. So you can take those policies from the LAN and from the wireless infrastructure and map that over, those same role-based policies I explained, over the wide area network. And they would be
Mm-hmm.
managed through a ClearPass. And so that would be your security posture for zero trust in that case, right? That way you're
Mm-hmm.
ensuring it. Now that's the east west, and then you've got intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, all of these other
Right.
capabilities. But one of the other things that's important in a zero trust environment is also what I call the north south. So that is, you're
Right.
going from the WAN to the data center, or from the WAN to a cloud provider, or you're going from the WAN to another partner WAN. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where, this whole notion of cloud security and the likes of Zscalers and Netscope and others that are in that space has grown, because more and more of the applications are being hosted in cloud, and the less so in the data center. So you've got these other solutions. So into being able to integrate that zero trust framework
Mm-hmm.
across vendors and across
Right.
both east west and the north south
Mm-hmm.
is definitely a challenge today for enterprises, because they're dealing with legacy. They're dealing, unless you're dealing a clean sheet of paper, often you got to, take what's there today and be able to, build this new zero trust framework and see where you can adapt it into the existing infrastructure, and which vendors are capable of, offering API support or integration more
Mm-hmm.
easily than others. Because I don't think it's a rip and replace for many enterprises.
Right, exactly. It's almost like a repurposing in some cases, or just adding a few things to that which you're already running, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to just mention is that, and Aruba has been, deploying huge wireless infrastructures for a lot of enterprises that,
Right,
household names that you would know, uh, for years. And
and that's where Aruba really started in the wireless space exclusively, right? Just to give
exactly,
folks
yeah.
who might not have that context. Yeah.
And as wireless, the wireless space evolved just like the WAN, in that everything was with controllers. So you had physical, and we still have those. Enterprises can still buy physical controllers if they want to manage that. But now we have something called Aruba Central, which is a
Hmm.
cloud-based service that everything is cloud-based. If you want to manage all of that infrastructure, you can use Aruba Central to do that. And that's hosted by Aruba.
Right.
And we're doing the same thing for the WAN. You can whether you're a service provider or enterprise, you can manage the SD-WAN yourself, or
Hmm.
we are integrating management for that and the orchestration of that so that you can have all the networking and security policies for the WAN, wireless LAN, wireless infrastructure through Aruba Central. And so that's a
Hmm.
huge, and everything becomes one management system, if you want to. So that
Hmm.
becomes one easier way for enterprises to deal with all of these different systems. The ClearPath security, you have a central management, and you have the WAN, the SD-WAN, and you have integrations with other partners, which I can talk about more if you're interested specifically on this
Yeah.
SSE area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point in thinking about kind of one of the things that I think it's worth sort of carefully going through is when you're thinking about how to implement all of this and you're going to a particular vendor or MSP, it's inevitably going to involve solutions from a variety of vendors.
Hmm.
And I wonder if you kind of go through that of how you as from that side, not from the enterprise side, think about pulling together the best in breed kind of vendors to offer a specific stack of services. Like, what does that look like when a customer comes to you
Yeah,
in terms of everyone, of course, wants to talk about this as a solution. Okay, just
yeah.
but it's great to break the solution down to the specific elements and vendors that are providing those solutions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So let me give you a little, yeah, I'll do that. And, just to give you kind of a quick analogy, and I wrote this in a recent blog on managed SASE, one size doesn't fit all. So
Hmm.
what that I was referring to is I use the analogy of clothing. When we want to buy different types of clothing, shirts, pants, all of us,
Hmm.
we don't go to one supplier or vendor or, like Polo or
Right.
Ralph Lauren or whatever, right? And buy everything, the shirts, pants, shoes from the same brand.
Right.
You want to pick, someone for a different reason. You like a shirt manufacturer, shirt brand, and pants. So similarly, I think it's the case with SASE, and more
Hmm.
so because of the security and networking components. And I think the SSC, which is Secure Service Edge, there's a number of different companies in that space. Aruba doesn't compete in that category itself directly.
Right. Right.
But our whole strategy has been, and this predates even being acquired by Aruba with Silver Peak, was to integrate and automate that integration with best of breed cloud security and security
Hmm.
vendors. So even
Exactly.
before cloud security took off way back 4 or 5 years ago, we were doing service chaining with the likes of Palo Alto and Checkpoint
Hmm.
and others. As cloud security has evolved, we're probably the most advanced in terms of integrations, API integration, automations, with all the Magic Quadrant. In fact, we're the only vendor today that integrates with Zscaler, Netscope, and McAfee, which are the three Magic Quadrant, but also all the
Hmm.
challengers. And what that means to customers is and service providers. So enterprises are going to have on a different path in the journey to SASE. And same thing for the service
Right.
providers. They're going to face customers say, look, we already have a security vendor. We already have an SD-WAN vendor. Can you manage that for us? Or we
Mm-hmm.
want to manage SD-WAN service from you, but can you work with our Zscaler or Cisco umbrella? And by the way, in mergers and acquisitions, which happens a lot, you're going to acquire an IT infrastructure that's going to have different vendors infrastructure as well.
I run into this problem all the time with clients, certainly, and,
Yeah.
and and sometimes doing a benchmark, it's even hard to get the network data to just do the benchmark for the acquired piece of the network, and it's a different vendor,
And
and
that's a huge pain
it's a
point.
massive headache.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
massive headache. So that's one of the things that we've made a huge effort and we think is really important when you're looking at SASE. And again, looking at these together, even as a managed service, the customer may want a combination of DIY,
Hmm.
SD-WAN, and
Hmm.
managed security, or vice versa, or both. And that's what I
Right.
kind of wrote in the blog. When you look at this as an enterprise, you may not find one service provider that today can do everything you want,
Hmm.
because you have a mixed vendor environment. Now, some vendors and some service providers will tell you, "Oh, you can, use vendors single stack and get all your SD-WAN or networking and all your security." But are you getting the best? And if you really,
Right.
you're going to make a compromise, right? And so what we're finding talking to enterprises and even to service providers, in fact, I think one of the AT&T executives was recently quoted saying that, you know what, for medium and larger customers, I think they're going to want best of class or best of breed, because
Absolutely. Yeah.
they don't want to compromise that. Why should they compromise their
Hmm.
zero trust framework or their security infrastructure that they already have invested in? But
Right.
at the same time, they want to take advantage of, let's say, an SD-WAN platform like Aruba has. And by the way, we can integrate to 9 security different companies now.
Hmm.
We keep
Hmm.
adding to that. So that's been a part of our, I think that's been part of our mantra, that, it's not, the world is really hybrid. And
Hmm.
when it comes to deployment, choice and flexibility, you can't, I don't think you should, as an enterprise or service provider, compromise that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to, you have the choice. And you can have both, by the way. You
Hmm.
could have a single SASE stack solution for some
Right.
folks, but I think you're going to you're going to need both, or several,
Well,
different vendors.
as an analyst, our favorite answer is it depends, right? So that the
Yeah,
geographic scope of your network, the services that you're running, the kinds of workloads that you've moved into, what kind of cloud, and all of that really can impact
yeah,
your decisions here,
absolutely.
right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so Nev, you've really touched on this, but I want to put a spotlight on this because I like the way that I think you framed this in the past. That you really can't fully implement a SASE posture without already having SD-WAN in place. That
Hmm.
we've heard about sort of some enterprises who might almost be thinking like, "Oh, I'm just going to move straight to SASE," but I wonder if you could kind of take us through those clear lines of how SD-WAN and SASE are really inextricably linked in your view.
Yeah, I think coming back to SD-WAN, I mean, SD-WAN pretty much is so focused on networking, in maximizing the
Hmm.
use of the network in all aspects of it. The transport, so maximizing and economizing the use of multiple of the bandwidth you have, leveraging broadband, right? So, really with the SASE security side, again, I come back to Secure Service Edge. Netscope, Zscaler, and McAfee are all companies very well regarded and leaders in security, but none of them support SD-WAN. And to build
Right.
that
Right.
networking legacy and heritage, to be able to build the routing in, so a lot of the capabilities that SD-WAN have are again an evolution of the data and control plane, being able to have a
Hmm.
software-based policy control. And I think the the thing that SD-WAN has is being able to create the the overlay policies that map the business requirements of an enterprise with the
Hmm.
application needs of that. So in other words, flipping what we used to in all these years, Greg, where
Hmm.
the application had to was only as good as the network. And
Right.
what we're trying to do, what SD-WAN, and I'm talking about the top SD-WAN vendors and
Hmm.
their capabilities, is you should be those platforms are there so that the network adapts to the application. Meaning, if I need two
Right.
links, then one of those networks is going down or there's a brownout, and even it happens to MPLS, I don't want to have any impact to that voice over IP or this video session like
Right.
we're doing. So that becomes
Hmm.
transparent. That's one of the huge benefits of SD-WAN, and where that networking control, policy control, the routing policy engines, and is really important. And you can't divorce that away from just having security, even for the remote user, without mapping that to be that quality of service, and that
Right.
which app gets more priority. And by the way, which app gets steered, and that's where you know policy steering. So we happen to have some pretty cool technology that on the first packet that comes in, we can steer. You can say, okay, does this go to the cloud security? Does go to the data center? Is this a
Right.
trusted app like, Microsoft 365 or Zoom? And I could send it
Hmm.
directly to those. And by the way, if I have an SD-WAN appliance sitting in a colo of Equinix or Megaport or one of those cloud on-ramp providers, I have
Right.
very high quality experience all the way to the doorstep of the cloud provider. So these are the
Right. That's
benefits.
the middle mile performance part taken care of.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take care. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people have overlooked that when we're
Hmm.
looking at the world we're in, right? There's the security piece, but then there's the performance part because if you put
Right.
a lot of security and you do add some overhead and latency into the
Of course. Of
equation.
course. That's
So
by nature.
there's
Yeah.
always a balancing act, and I think that's where we actually manage all the security policies for the Zscalers, the Palo Altos, if we're connecting to those. Not only that, we automate those policies and set up the tunnels so that any new app, and for example, if the Zscaler network goes down, you can have a backup on the Aruba Edge Connect. I can have a backup cloud security company with Netscope or Palo Alto.
Hmm.
We're the only
Hmm.
vendor that can do that right now so that a customer really has a very resilient experience with those applications that they're using a combination of SD-WAN and security.
Yeah, I wonder if you could almost kind of put it in a sort of historical framework of in the MPLS world of 5+ years ago, or now for a lot of folks, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about, okay, so I have some applications that get a class of service header, and their
Mhm.
performance is maybe different, but ultimately it's about the network, and then security is something completely separate from that. And then you have sort of like the start of SD-WAN, which is really focused on performance, through things like forward error correction and load balancing
Mhm.
and whatnot. And now we're coming in with bringing the security in conjunction with that performance,
Mhm.
from the edge to the first mile, essentially.
Yeah.
Does that work as a kind of framework of what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, all
Yeah.
those things you said make perfect sense. And the packet steering that I was talking about is also part of that inspection that
Hmm. Hmm.
you as a enterprise can set up the policies for every application and by
Right.
user if you need to, right? Whether that application gets
Yeah.
steered. So that integration has become more and more important because of the use of broadband as well, as we know, right? Broadband meaning
Right.
it could be DIA, which is usually managed, but it could be just
Hmm.
consumer broadband like many of
Right.
us have
Yeah.
at home. So that poses an opportunity for service providers, by the way. I may be an Xfinity like I am a broadband home user, but I'm also a business remote worker. Can a
Hmm.
service provider offer a managed overlay over that infrastructure? Absolutely.
Right.
And they
Right.
don't even
Yeah.
have to do a truck roll if they, in some cases. So that's
Hmm.
something opens up the opportunity to, and in fact, we've just announced this Edge Connect fabric, which will extend SD-WAN from mobile devices to a remote access Aruba, like you would have in a retail store, all the way to an enterprise and to a data center to cloud provider. And that fabric, um, which is just being announced, will make it very easy for enterprises, no matter where their employees are working, and if they're mobile, be able to take advantage of some, if not all, the SD-WAN capabilities you would have in the branch office.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, the sort of end game, the brass ring here is for layers 1, 2, and 3 to effectively disappear to the customer, right?
Exactly,
So,
exactly. You got
yeah,
it right. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately, we're saying that, Greg, but the service
yeah.
providers that you deal with, that becomes
Mhm.
commoditized, and that's why they have to.
That is the fear, right? Yeah,
That's the fear. That's why
yeah.
they have to sell. They should be, and we're
Well, they're
providing
becoming
it.
MSPs, that's the ultimate goal there, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think SASE is an opportunity that they see that maybe we can sell more managed services. At the same
Hmm.
time, they have to understand that it's not one size fits all, as I've been saying, right?
Right,
There's going to be
right.
different flavors of SASE.
Yeah, you want your customer to have access to the app store, but you don't want it to be a really curated app store, if you will.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Now, this has been really interesting. I think that we can all come away with kind of a clearer path here, and as such, I wonder if you could take us maybe through what's next. Like if we know what the clear path of the moment is, and kind of what we need to do now. How do you see that developing over? In this space, it's hard to go out much more than a year or so. So
yeah,
I'll take you off the
yeah.
hook of
Oh
of
yeah,
a
sure.
long term vision. But what do you think is developing here in the next year or so?
Yeah, I think there's a few things we can talk about. You're right. It's not these days. I don't know. We want to look beyond that, and
Hmm.
but I would say first of all the multi cloud, which is you see it and you read about it a lot, is real. The fact that
Right.
I was just reading the other day, and I was just shocked, and you would be, as maybe know this as well already, that some enterprises are using over 1,000 SaaS applications, and that's not
Of
uncommon.
course. Well, especially since you manage shadow IT at the
Exactly.
outset, right?
Yeah.
The
So
everything is a service now. We always joke at TeleGeography that we should do market research as a service. So,
yeah, that's true. You
like,
should, and
yeah,
that's what I was going to
yeah,
say. That's the next big
yeah.
trend. I think as a service, certainly Aruba and HPE are making a big push into strategically offering everything as a service, meaning
Hmm.
storage, networking,
Right.
compute, as well as different consumption models, whether you want hardware, software, on-prem, in the cloud, a mix of that. That's definitely going to be reality. And um, at the same time as that trend is happening, as I said, the multi-cloud trend is real. So we see a lot of enterprise customers, a lot of our Edge Connect deployments now that we've had for several years, moving workloads to different, to one of the big three cloud providers, or sometimes to both. And
Hmm.
one of the things they're asking for, and I think there's a market opportunity, is that they want to be able to move. Maybe they'll even move between cloud providers. The more,
Right.
so that's another. Well, I'm using Google today. I'm going to move to Azure, or I'm using AWS, and I'm wondering. I don't think that. I think that will happen, but that there's an opportunity there as well in the networking space. The other thing that I think
Hmm.
security will be part of every networking decision, and vice versa. Networking will
Yes.
be part of every.
Absolutely.
I think that's pretty. It's already happening. I think it's going to be more and more evident. Um, I think that the cloud providers, and I'm talking about the big three, AWS and Google
Hmm.
and Microsoft Azure, are going to move more and more into the edge space. We have done
Hmm.
a number of integrations with all of those to make it easier to have SD-WAN um, almost connect to the back. It's connecting to the backbone of those providers, Greg. So basically, once you're on their
Hmm.
backbone, you don't need to use a service provider like an MPLS provider.
That's right. They have the network already.
You have a
So
network
yeah.
already.
Why?
So I think the danger right now is that will they move even further into the edge and into the WAN? And they're
If
already,
they move all the way into the edge, then the network is just the cloud,
yeah,
right? So,
exactly. So that
yeah.
is definitely an opportunity for them. All of them are,
Hmm.
I think, migrating that way, which will make life very interesting for all the service providers.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also at the same time, there's the cloud consumption model that we talked about, right?
Right. Right.
How do, I think some of the enterprises want to be able to do more co-managed as well. So co-manage is
Hmm.
something that people talk about, but I think it's starting to be another trend that, we're seeing, we want the best of everything. We want it managed,
Right.
maybe, but at the same time, we want to be able to, make some adjustments, make some
Yeah, you don't want to
changes.
give up control. You don't want to have the overhead that the management requires, but you also want to be able to implement your own policies and all this
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah,
stuff, right? So,
exactly. And I
yeah.
think that's something that will be really interesting to see how we manage that. And especially with, with the threat of more cyber attacks, with what's
Hmm.
happening, on the global front in Ukraine and
Yeah.
elsewhere, that I think you're going to see that really be important
Yeah.
as an area. And I just think there's going to be more and more. bandwidth, and you track that better than anyone. You guys do. The bandwidth consumption is not going to slow down. I mean, I know when I go to the office, and which I don't do as often, I may be still on a Zoom call and not going to the meeting room where the Zooms.
Half the day.
So use of
exactly.
bandwidth within the branches and infrastructure and traffic patterns is changing, I think, permanently. We're not all necessarily going to sit in those conference rooms and do video conferencing calls, even when we're in the same office.
And the handset is dead effectively now. It was already well on its way to the grave before COVID happened, but this was the nail in the coffin, right? So yeah, for sure. And for years we've heard service providers saying, prices are falling so fast, I don't know how I can stay in business with these prices, and demand has always come to the rescue there. Right? So I don't see that slowing down. If anything, it's speeding up. Right. So HBO Max, right, is going to release the movie for your home viewers at the same time that it comes in the theaters, if not before. Right. You know what I mean? So just every facet of life is becoming more digital that way. So I don't think that there's anything to worry about in the service provider perspective there necessarily, because we all want more digital all the time,
and we want
the
it,
enterprise
and
too,
we want it at high quality as well, right?
Exactly.
That's the key thing. It's because there's nothing worse than watching or being on a call with someone, and we have to stop, or now we have to move to a different platform, or go back to the handset, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Nav, this is a great conversation. It's really fun to talk kind of like, analyst to analyst in a way, even though you're on the other side of the table, as it were, now. Right. So I think that was a lot of fun. I wonder if you could let folks out there know how to find you, like your ebook, your blog, which directions could you point them?
Yeah, I think you should just, the easiest thing is go to arubanetworks.com. You can search our blogs. I've written a number of them on these topics. And the ebook, I think if you search SASE or cloud security, WAN transformation, unless you want to send that out later on. I don't have it handy right now, but we certainly can.
Yeah, we're happy to attach it to the notes of the show if you want to.
But
that'd be great.
And Greg, look forward to hopefully seeing each other in person, and many of your listeners at upcoming events or at shows. So hopefully we're getting back to normal.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm really excited for that. So, as much as I don't prefer airplane travel, I actually can't wait to get on one again.
It's so funny to say that, right? When we all complained.
Exactly. Yeah. How many years were we bitterly complaining that now we miss it? Yeah. So, excellent. Well, Nav, thanks so much for joining me. This was great.
Well, thank you, Greg. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. The WAN Manager podcast comes from the team at TeleGeography. It's edited and produced by Jane Miller, and it's hosted by me, Greg Bryan. I also wrote the theme song that you're listening to right now. To learn more about our data, jump over to telegeography.com. Or if you want to get right into more WAN content like you hear on the show, you can visit TeleGeography's WAN forum at wanforum.com. We've got all of our podcast episodes over there, WAN Manager survey data, and extra analysis pieces. That's all for now. So until next time, WAN enthusiasts.